three leading voices for the topic at hand from organizations involved in sustainable construction in informal urban areas. Sheila Patel is the founder and director of the Society for the Promotion of Area Resource Centers in India. Based in Mumbai, the NGO focuses on the voice of the urban poor in urban development. Sheila is widely recognized for seeking urgent attention to the issue of urban poverty, housing, and infrastructure. She's also the founder of Slum Dwellers International, a transnational social movement of the urban poor, whose board she previously chaired. Her currently campaign, Roof Over Our Heads, is a partnership between SPAR, SDI, Global Resilience Partnership, and other supporting organizations. Our OOH vision is delivering resilient, low carbon, and affordable homes and improving public infrastructure to urban residents, particularly those living and working in informality. Alexandre Apsan-Frediani is a principal researcher at the Human Settlement Group in the International Institute for Environment and Development. In London, based in London, UK. Alexandre co-leads the housing justice thematic work at IIED, where he runs research and projects to strengthen the capacities of grassroots groups to contest housing injustice, influence governance system, and build global alliances for housing justice. Alexandre is an expert affiliate of Architecture Sans Frontières UK, part of the boards of Habitat International Coalition and the Sierra Leone Urban Research Center, and a fellow of the Human Development and Capability Association. Last but not least, Arne Georg Jansen is the urban environment lead at Cities Alliance. As a political scientist, he is interested in the social and economic impact of climate change on the local level, as well as the political response on the international level. Currently, he manages a global program on climate change, resilience, and urban informality. Welcome very much to our distinguished panelists. But before we move to the panel, I'm pleased to leave the floor to Ms. Carmen Vogt, head of the Global Section Cities at the GIZ headquarters in Germany, for her opening remarks.
I will step in for Carmen Vogt. She was not able to join this meeting. I'm very sorry. She had a problem, a private problem on the familiar side. So I'm stepping in now for her. I'm Barbara Scholz. I'm the head of the project Urban Innovation Made in Africa. I'm part of GIZ as well. And I'm representing here Carmen Vogt, who is the head of the division cities within the global sector from global and sectoral programs in GIZ. I'm very happy to open this global peer learning series today that GIZ is implementing on behalf of the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. During 2024, we are organizing 5 webinars. This is the first one in close collaboration with the Cities Alliance. ICLEI, UN Habitat, SDI, the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, the African Union for Housing Finance, and the City Diplomacy Lab, starting with today's kickoff event on sustainable construction in informal areas. But why do we do this? There is a pressing need to change the way we construct our cities. If we want to succeed in achieving a livable, just, and sustainable future for all. This is all the more true when it comes to informal settlements. Today, more than 1 billion people are living in informality. By 2030, the number could rise to 2 billion, with many people living in hazard-prone areas. This is a source from Cities Alliance. Africa right now is facing the fastest urban growth worldwide. In the next 30 years, its cities will become home to an additional 950 million people. So this growth is both a challenge and a chance for the global buildings transition, which is needed if we want to achieve the global climate and sustainability agendas. Within the German Development Corporation, we strive for a real and inclusive buildings transition. For us, this includes highlighting the social benefits of building more near zero and resilient buildings worldwide. An inclusive buildings transition combines the goal of poverty reduction and informality with our agenda for zero carbon buildings. This is essential for a sustainable building sector and the construction of just cities that leave no one behind. For instance, informal settlements are often located in undesirable land and are thus most affected by natural disasters and extreme weather events. Most buildings are not more than fragile wooden huts and get easily flushed away. This is where we must act through integrated and inclusive urban planning, through adequate, resilient and safe buildings, but also through building more resilient communities as a whole. Creating social benefits also means creating fair jobs in the construction industry and enhancing the knowledge and skills in this field, especially for women, since they are massively underrepresented in the sector. I just attended the Buildings and Climate Global Forum in Paris 2 weeks ago, which was organized by France and the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. This forum was an important step in bringing the need for a sustainable buildings transition on the international agenda. It has also shown that there are already many innovative ideas and approaches for resilient and sustainable construction, also in terms of increasing circularity and favoring local value chains. Yet these often seem to be rather local solutions, mostly not really well known at national, regional, or international level. So it is important to facilitate an upscaling and transfer of knowledge and remove barriers to implementation to jointly accelerate our action for a global and just building transition. With this webinar series, we want to contribute to this goal and hope to inspire and increase mutual learning for just and sustainable cities for all. I hope you enjoyed today's session and will engage in a lively question and answer session with our panelists. Back to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schultz. You delivered a comprehensive picture of the challenge, but you also laid the ground for the opportunities for building more resilient communities. Thank you very much. We would like now to engage our audience in a quick icebreaker. We will use Slido to this purpose. And so please connect through the link that you have in the chat or that you have taken previously with your phone, as we have a couple of questions for you. I will leave the time for you to connect, and we will start with a question on where are you joining us from? I can already see the first answers appearing. Here they are. This is so interesting to see how diverse our audience is, geographically speaking. And I can see that we have, well, several continents involved, Germany and Bonn specifically being the main origin of our audience, but we can see that we have Mozambique, Brussels, Berlin, Italy, very represented as well, and a number of other origins across several continents, from Asia to Europe, Africa, and even the Americas. We can see North America, Latin America being part of the conversation. So welcome very much to all of you. It's definitely an added value to have such a diverse origin from our audience. This will certainly reflect positively in the Q&A that we will have in the second part of the session. Welcome to all of you. I can see that Mozambique and Germany result as the number 2 countries represented. Equal point for third position, Italy and South Africa. So, and Belgium with Brussels. So welcome everyone. We have now a second question for you. That is a question about the topics that you would like to see in this discussion, the context of urban development. What are specifically the topics that you're interested in? You can type in your question. Resilient housing, the first answer. Oh, here they are. Whoa, this is very interesting. Let's see if any of those terms emerges. Oh, I can see that housing affordability and affordable housing, that are basically synonyms, stand out. Affordable housing, without social housing and resilient housing also being very, very important topics for this conversation. But definitely we can say that affordable housing is the number one interest for our audience. As you can see, we're also highlighting inclusivity. Well, very well. We can see, we will try, and I invite our distinguished panelists to take this map, word map, very well in consideration when we now move to our panel session. Thank you very much to all of you. We can see as last emerging common points, climate, a very interesting element, of course, we will try to match with the social and economic component of the topics. Thank you. Thank you very much for participating in this ice-breaking exercise. And now, well, I'm really pleased to leave the floor to the protagonists of today's session, our distinguished panelists. And I would like to start with Ms. Patel, Sheila Patel. So, Sheila, what are the main challenges that impede the development of sustainable housing, especially for the urban poor?
Thank you so much. And Barbara, that was a wonderful introduction. We're very pleased that GIZ, which is a leader in working with cities, is part of this process. I would like to start off by saying that while there's a lot of rhetoric about the most vulnerable communities living in cities and the projections of how many people are coming, but in reality, we have not even touched the tip of the iceberg in understanding what their challenges are and even understanding how to find solutions which are local, specific, and demonstrate serious alternatives that can go to scale. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of impediments of in informality that planning itself produces. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the work that we are doing on Roof Over Our Heads for the last 2 years seeks to work with the most vulnerable communities in urban cities, focusing on women's collectives to identify the most critical elements of the house design and construction in which they live, and to develop with them a resilience index to understand what needs to be done to make this happen. And the reason we are starting with communities, with the materials they can afford, with the money that they can have, and expand this repertoire, because adaptation and resilience are elements that have to come out of the dispersal of knowledge universally. It's not good enough for researchers and activists and interventionists to be aware of this, but every person living informally must be able to invest their resources in better solutions. So if you look at this process, it talks about what we did last year, which is we had a whole series of roundtables to engage lots of organizations, many of whom have now become our partners. And we have undertaken 17 labs, learning labs as we call them, in 9 cities in India, to develop the design of the investigation of how to work with women's collectives to understand the materials, the designs, and the vulnerability of their homes. Can you go to the next slide, please? This process, next slide, please. This process is like this. This is how we demonstrate the different elements of the house. We identify every single material that is used in the house, how much it costs. what is its values, and everything is color-coded so that women can understand the benchmark of what the present situation is. This process is as important for communities as it is for intermediaries and for general advocacy and researchers. And the idea is to start with the most vulnerable, to sort their problems with a view of transitioning to better quality, better resilience, and better impact. Next slide, please. Our work, please go ahead. I think we are working at 3 different levels. We are looking at what amounts of money people can actually spend on their homes incrementally. We're looking at how we can work with those they get their materials from, either it is from waste picking or from local building material sellers. We work with the people who help them construct their homes. And we look at who needs to change and make a transition to things better. In the larger context, we are looking at those people who lend money to poor communities to improve their homes. We're looking at ways by which big material providers for construction start looking at these households as their market and use our work as R&D. And we're also working with designers, engineers, architects, and planners to explore this process. Next slide. The purpose of our work is to operate at several levels. We want to work globally to draw attention to the data that Barbara talked about, which is 1 billion moving to 2 billion without any solutions for the 1 billion. So you can imagine the plight in which the 2 billions will be. When discussions about cities happen, these people are completely invisible, and therefore we want their voices, their presence, and their strategies to be front and center in the discussion of cities. Because transition, transformation, and social justice must start with the activities and actions of the poor themselves, supported by all of us in what we do. So I come here with the ambition of setting up 100 learning labs in 20 countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and MENA, with partners who will work with us for 3 years to develop this process and to learn from it, to engage institutions, and to solve this very wicked problem, which demonstrates that we will go deep and carefully and in a sustainable way to find solutions with the worst stuff. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me for this event.
Thank you very much, Sheila. We can see we have big challenges in front of us, but we are particularly inspired by your methodology, and we look forward to see its evolution. We will certainly have the time to discuss this further in the second part with the Q&A. Now, I would like to invite Alexander Absan-Frediani to take the floor. And the question for him is, how can sustainable construction projects be implemented effectively while addressing the needs of the urban poor on a big scale?
Great, Lorenzo. Thank you so much for this invite. And yeah, it's great to be in this panel and participate in this conversation. And I will start by saying that we really need to move away from solutions that are technology driven and start engaging with the more systemic questions that are shaping the extraction, processing, distribution, and building materials. And the reality is that what Sheila and her team is doing is shedding light on something that is extremely hidden or not known in current debates and conversations. We don't know really what are the materials that are being used, and most importantly, how they are getting to informal settlements. So we need to get to know much more about those things if we are to be addressing them. In the recent event in Paris that we heard Barbara making reference to, with the issue of informality was marginal. And we know that communities in informal settlement are in the front line of climate change. So there's a huge discrepancy between what we're talking about and to whom it matters most. And we really need to make advancements on this. I will share with you some key reflections from the research that I've been conducting in partnership with SDI, Slum Dwellers International, in coordination with Spark at the Roof Over Our Head, and drawing on expertise and research that has been conducted by affiliates of SDI in Harare, in Zimbabwe, Dialogues on Shelter, and in Freetown, with Kodusapa, 2 affiliates of SDI. And I will share with you some of the highlights. This is a diagram that came from some of the workshops that we have conducted on this topic. So my first message in coming from this work is that for sustainable construction, if we can go to the next slide, for sustainable construction to be implemented effectively, we need to recognize and secure diverse livelihoods that are attached to the value chain of building materials. Drivers, sailors, miners, rock breakers, vendors, site managers, truck and motorcycle owners, constructors, food suppliers, and I can go on and on and on. The value chain of building materials that arrive in informal settlements are responsible to a series of important livelihoods. And what we see often is governments criminalizing many of those livelihood strategies, or being very contradictory, giving mixed messages if we should strengthen them or if we should make them irregular or illegal, and failing to actually regulate them in a way that makes the jobs in the construction sector safer. Second point that is coming from our work is that for sustainable construction projects to be implemented, and we can go to the next slide, for it to be really meaningful, we need to secure tenure, and we need to improve access to infrastructure networks. If we don't work on security of tenure and increase access to infrastructure networks, the improvements are not going to be equitable by any means. We see that security of tenure has a relationship with how communities are choosing materials. Sometimes they choose materials, they don't invest in materials because they're afraid of evictions, and they choose materials based on their capacity to move from one place to another. And in other contexts, what we see is that people invest in materials to actually gain visibility of the long-term permanence in a particular place, or to deal with particular risks. So it's very contextual, but what we see everywhere is that there is a relationship between security of tenure and the choice of building materials, and we need to attach that. On top of that, we see also that communities in informal settlements are often paying much more for the price of building materials than those living outside informal settlements, and often associated to transport costs. In Freetown, we see that households can pay up to 50% more for a bag of sand than those living outside informal settlements. So this is a poverty penalty that creates extremely unfair context for the use of building materials, in which it then contributes to a cycle of inequality in various different ways. Third point, and if we go to the next slide, is that we need to think about this transition to more sustainable construction practices in a fairer, and also to distribute burdens and responsibilities accordingly. And we know that the poor communities and residents in informal settlements are not the main ones that has been driving and responsible for climate change, and therefore we cannot devolve the burden of transition to them. And this is very specific, for example, in the case of cement. Yeah, we are saying that cement makes a huge contribution to emissions, and we cannot be criminalizing the use of cement in informal settlements, which is actually very important to build resilience, and leaving unchecked large producers as well as large users of cement in a global scale. So we need to be to make sure that we address those issues in relative terms of who is actually responsible for this transition and to absorbing the burdens of the transition. My fourth point, if we go to the next slide, is that we need to engage into the governance that is shaping those relationships. We know very little, for example, of how global incentives or incentives that happens elsewhere, or regulations elsewhere, how this end up impacting or creating disadvantages for those living in informal settlements around building materials. We need to generate much better knowledge about that. We know there is a relationship there, but we cannot actually yet put our fingers exactly on which of those regulations are or not affecting. We know locally, we are much better able to understand them locally. I give you an example of this. In the case of Zimbabwe, for example, where asbestos, there has been historically a lot of incentives for the use of asbestos, and that hinders the possibility of any other alternative and more sustainable technology to be uptaken, given that we have a long-term mechanism of incentivizing what is a very toxic material, especially when it's broken. So we need to create a much more nuanced, a much more fairer, much more healthier, much more resilient set of incentives and regulations. And stories that we see as successful are those when collectives are empowered, when they have a higher bargaining power to negotiate with those regulations locally, at a city level, and also when they are able to engage them at global scale. So we need to do a much better job, not only to focus on solutions, but how can they be embedded in collective processes, empowering grassroots groups to be able to then store materials collectively, to negotiate for regulations and incentives with policymakers at the local, national, and global scale. So my highlight is from the work that we are doing is that if we don't integrate the issue of fairness on the value chain of building materials in informal settlements, we are not going to be able to achieve the transitions that we have committed to in recent commitments, as well as the acceleration of resolutions of UN Habitat to transform informal settlements. So I will stop here. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. We can see how relevant it is to have the researcher approach to those fairness goals and inequity challenges that you highlighted. And now I would like to leave the floor to Arne Georg Jansen from Cities Alliance, who will present its own organization's approach.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you, Sheila and Alex, for all these relevant insights from projects on the ground already. For me, it's a bit similar like with Barbara. I have been asked to jump in for Laura Lima, who's our head of global programs. She got sick, so I'm jumping in today and telling you a bit about what Cities Alliance is doing on the topic and why at Cities Alliance we think this is so much important. So yeah, my name is Arne Jansen. I lead our work around climate change here at Cities Alliance. So all the work that has been done goes through a climate lens, but all the aspects that have been mentioned around the social aspects are of much importance for us as well. So the Cities Alliance, just briefly, is a global partnership with a very diverse membership, including bilateral governments from both the global north and the global south. We have organized local governments, we have IGOs, and we have organized civil society. We are hosted by UNOPS and are therefore part of the UN system. And we are, as I said, a very diverse membership, but we're unified by one goal, and this is to improve the lives of people in cities, especially those that are often overheard, the urban poor. And we heard already by both Sheila and Alex how this is relevant for this topic. So how does climate construction and urban poor connect? For us, in our work, we focus on the question of how do we plan for an urban growth in a more sustainable way, especially when a majority of this growth takes place in an informal context. This is what we call the social dimension of sustainable construction. So the challenges are huge. We heard also from Barbara in the beginning. I want to pick on the fact that half of all buildings that are yet to be built will be built primarily by the urban poor themselves and through the help of the informal sector, right? So informality and urban poor, that's something Cities Alliance has some 25 years of experience working with. And we think that these are topics that need to be represented better into international agreements, international goals. So when we talk about the international agenda, like the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, or the building breakthrough that was also mentioned before, as a climate mitigation initiative. What we need to make sure is that this transition that we are asking for, that we are trying to achieve, is a just transition, a transition that everyone can afford and that in the end leaves no one behind. So how do we do this? At Cities Alliance, we are working with our members and some key stakeholders in a working group on the topic. And I'm very happy that we have colleagues from Spark and also from IID, Alex, represented in this group. So we are not implementing on the ground ourselves on this topic, but we are trying to gather some of the insights and bring it to a higher level and see what we can do on a policy level. So one of the goals is to identify entry points for this, what I call social dimension of sustainability into the international debate. So, and as I said, I mean, if half of the expected growth in cities happens rather informally, what do we need to reach these people? How can we reach them through global and formal processes, or how can we have their voices heard there? So what we did last year, we gathered this working group and we had several meetings and discussions to frame our intervention, our entry points, including the question of, can the urban poor actually afford sustainable construction? And the answer, in a nutshell, is yes, they can, and they often do so already by using more heritage-based knowledge and local materials, for example. But we need to support them, right? We need equitable political frameworks on all levels, and we need to bring the voices of the urban poor into these conferences, into these conference rooms and decisions of COPs, WUFs, and other high-level conferences. Therefore, we must go beyond climate-friendly but often expensive materials and methodologies. We need a sustainable construction that is exactly fostering this just transition, making it not only climate-friendly but also affordable, attractive, and attainable for the urban poor. Just to give you a brief example, you can see here the position paper also is a very brief document where we try to put these entry points together. One entry point is, of course, can they afford it? So we need to ensure that sustainable construction options are economically viable for all residents, and therefore we need to look at the value chains and everything that Alex and Sheila are already working on. But we need to do this at scale, of course. So we need to involve policymakers, and we need to involve the private sector on this as well. Second, is it sustainable, right? I mean, this is one of the major questions, of course, when it comes to looking to it from a climate perspective. This focuses on environmentally friendly practices, material use, and how to apply circular economy principles best in this informal context. Thirdly, do they actually want it, right? I mean, often there is also problems of acceptance. There is a need to tackle a certain view on local material use and incremental techniques that are so important at scale, but are often seen as rather, just for the urban poor. So right, so we need to work also on the shift of this perception, and we need to create positive perceptions, for instance, through a series of pilot projects to showcase the results. And I think Move Over Our Head, for instance, is a very good example of how we can highlight some of these successes. But of course, we also need to overcome piloting. We need to go to scale as soon as possible to address these challenges of both urbanization and the need for climate adaptation. And I think we have a good example. We mentioned this huge growth in the informal sector as a challenge, but of course it can be also seen as an opportunity, right? If you convince companies that these small entities, but in the end huge markets, are something to tackle, I guess this is something where we can have a good leverage on for results. And last but not least, we need to engage people. For all the points raised above, We need to win over the people, involve them in any planning processes, listen to them, listen to their experience and stories, and create opportunities out of this for them. What is in there for them when we talk about climate resilience and adaptation? There needs to be an improvement for their life in their daily life for truly just transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arne, for highlighting this big challenge of the affordability and how to deal with it with this multi-actor action capable of including changing the perception. Thank you very much to you and to the other panelists for this first inspiring round of answers. We now would like to move to the Q&A. The Q&A will, of course, feature the questions coming from the audience, and you can ask questions through the Slido app. Once again, you can see on the screen the QR code to access it through your smartphone, or you can use the link which has been posted in the chat. The chat is not being used itself for questions, so please use this app, Slido app that we are providing. And we will have soon enough the questions popping on the screen. Meanwhile, allow me to ask first quick questions as you write your own to our panelists. I would like to ask if they can provide a quick 1-minute answer, each one of them, on what is, from their perspective, the most important lesson from informal urban communities located in the global south to the urban communities in the global north. Maybe we can start with Sheila. I'm sorry, Sheila, we have a little issue with the microphone. We cannot hear you. Seems like we are currently experiencing a little audio issue with Sheila. I would like to ask our tech support if they can address this issue. And meanwhile, allow me to move to Alexander. We will go back to Sheila as soon as possible. Alexander, would you like to give your take on this knowledge sharing question that I just asked?
Yeah, I think from the conversations that I'm having, I think what is coming up very clearly is that in this particular conversation, the global value chain and global regulations are extremely important. And therefore, I think what the lessons, I mean, what's coming from grassroots communities in informal settlements, they are saying exactly, they're asking us exactly this question of how are the incentives happening in the global north and the decisions making that's happening at the global north, how is this actually coming down and impacting our everyday realities here in the way we are accessing building materials and how affordable they are. So I think the key lesson for me is that those things are interconnected, and we need to be able to demonstrate those connections much more effectively so that we can then intervene on them. We know that, for example, the EU regulations around the decarbonisation of the cement industry is pushing cement industries to relocate in the African continent, then devolving new risks around the extraction and production of cement in the African continent. So there are those interconnections, and there are ways within which the burden of transition being then displaced to the global south. And we need to be able to demonstrate them and to be able to carry out joint campaigns to try to address those.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Is the microphone of Sheila working now? Sheila, can you turn on your microphone? Seems like there is a little technical issue with the microphone. Apologies with our audience. I take this opportunity to ask the same question to Arne.
Yeah, thank you, Lorenzo. And maybe it's better for me to be before Sheila, because Sheila's responses are always so good and holistic. There's always there's sometimes hard to say anything else. I mean, just a point maybe from our side, from our work with these communities is really the existing social fabric, the existing innovation that takes place on the ground. And if you look at it from a let's say circular economy perspective, for instance, the use of materials and the use of basic technologies and the use of all kind of resources is maximized already on the ground, right? I mean, this is mostly for sheer because it's necessary for them to do, right? But I mean, this embeds at least a chance also for communities in the global north to learn from these examples, and vice versa, maybe providing through the let's say global agenda also opportunities through climate support financing, for instance, to tackle some of these issues that are actually yeah, that they are at the front line for the global south. So in this regard, I guess this could be rather an exchange than a learning from north to south, right? This could be something that we could listen also to successful methods and forms of organization in those communities.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes, thank you,
my
Sheila.
My computer has frozen, so I'm talking on my phone, so apologies.
No problem.
Okay, so I think that here in this particular event itself, we are 3 sets of initiatives and institutional arrangements that have tremendous potential for engaging in this process together. So we bring the different dimensions into this work. Because one of the problems we all face is that this space is very lonely. There's a lot of rhetoric. There's not enough action. There's not enough collaboration. And there is no sustained financing mechanisms that support the work that we do over long periods of time. So I think that if we have a commitment today that everything we do in our 100 labs with communities, with good quality documentation, is used by IID, by Cities Alliance, by GIZ, and all the other groups that I'm hoping that the Race to Resilience, of which I am an ambassador, brings together. This includes many of the businesses, companies that are important for us to bring into this process. And I think that this should be the kind of output that we all make a commitment to, because usually what happens is we have this fabulous discussion that we go and do our own thing, and we don't actually knock our heads together to say, how will we share what we do? How will we support each other? And how will we force our way into making this a mainstream issue in both development and climate change? Because this is the other problem. Right from the UN down, you have SDGs on one side and you have the climate change process on the other, where you're talking about very poor people. And Cities Alliance and IID have championed this a lot. We have to do it together. We have to put this together, and we have to make everything we do in development investments to be critically based on climate science. We cannot do things that go against climate science, and yet we cannot hold poor people responsible if we don't engage them to understand the implications and the choices of doing that. So I want to say that we should make a commitment to become a primary partnership which brings more and more people together. And there are so many in this particular audience, my colleagues in SDI, people from other organizations, that must work together because there's too much rhetoric and not enough action. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and thanks to Arne and Alexandre as well. I think that this first round of answers really also answered the first question, the most voted remark. That, as you have probably seen, you can thumb up the questions and the remarks on Slido, a very interesting feature that really challenged this idea, this pre-concept of the global north or the rich countries, as you may refer to know things better. This circularity of knowledge and the coming together of forces, it's definitely the way to go in face of challenges that are shared. Second most voted question, it's also for you, Sheila. How can countries participate in ROOH Labs initiatives?
I think countries and mayors of cities have to deal with three very difficult and painful realities. Cities are going to host more and more people who are poor, who have come out of dealing with disasters and multi-generational poverty. They're going to come into their cities. Our cities have not solved the problem of 5 to 8 generations of poor people who are living informally on the basis of the fact, as Alex said, that we have not been able to provide them secure tenure. They live in very difficult conditions. We don't want to give them any security. So they live in even more dilapidated situations, which is exacerbated with climate. So the first thing is, how do we deal with our colonial history of planning? We're all locked into land ownership and land use systems that are clearly colonial in most of the cities in the global south. And it's very convenient for present governments and mayors to say, we can't do anything about it. But it's a man-made instrument. It can be changed. So how courageous are our mayors and our nation states who care about poor people, who say they care about poor people, to make a change in that. The other very important thing is, don't underestimate how much resources, manpower, woman power, and asset creation people are doing themselves. In Asia, the data shows that only 8.2% of households have received any state subsidy for housing or infrastructure. The rest has been done by people. So let's look at what is strategic to allow communities to do better with better resources, and what are the things that cities can do for them. So I think the cities can give them tenure or tenure security, and GLTN at the UN Habitat has a range of options that we can explore. The second thing is, we go all out hammer and tongs to look at materials and create and demonstrate that this is a market for businesses. And we look at all the university, research, and other institutions and your organizations to work out a range of structural and design solutions that people can appropriate. Our labs are there. We are going to do 100 labs. We invite you to resource them, to participate in them. But the idea is that we demonstrate on the ground a range of local solutions, and I think we can do it. Back to you.
Thank you, Sheila, for this encouraging answer. And I see that there is a lot of votes for a question for Alexandre. Have there been any success stories somewhere in the world where the topic of tenure highlighted in Alexandre's talk has been addressed in a satisfying way? This is a question from Wolfram.
Thanks for the question, Lorenzo. I'm embarrassed to respond to that question with Sheila here. Well, thank you, Sheila, for putting your hand up. And then there are also many SDI colleagues also in the call, and we have seen so many stories of enumeration around savings group that have been able to actually trigger and to catalyze a process of tenure regularization that is not purely distributing people title to individual households, but actually approach the land tenure question from a spectrum, the spectrum of land tenure regularization process as a continuum. And we have so many stories of even like community land trust in informal settlements in Latin America that is getting off the ground, more collective forms of ownership, of zoning instruments that have been used to guarantee security of tenure without necessarily just distributing titles. So there's so many different stories and initiatives worldwide that has been already compiled, and UN Habitat has done recently a really interesting documentation of community-led forms of housing and land that have unlocked many different types of security of tenure. And there's a lot of academic work. Environmental urbanization, it's a journal that IIED hosts, has a documentation of many of those stories. And one thing that I would highlight, also connected to Sheila's point, the quick win for us here is local governments. Local governments has a key role to play and can facilitate this process. They can quick win, build roads. If you build access network for roads in informal settlements, we know that can already reduce the price of transporting building materials. We have planning systems, as Sheila was saying, we need to review them to create new planning regulations around not only in terms of spatial plan, but also the characteristics of the conditions of the building and the habitability levels that sometimes constrain the possibility of securing tenure. So we need to review planning codes. We need to create upgrading. We need to support collective organizations to purchase materials and store them in communities and distribute and so forth. Local and regional governments, a key actor here that can generate many quick wins and important quick wins that will make building materials more affordable and to increase the choice of them for informal settlements.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. I would like to ask to Arne if you would like to add anything to these points, and I was thinking particularly to the element of local governments that is your main target.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, of course, some of our constituencies are local governments, and when you talk to them, you open, of course, another chain of perspective and problems that comes with being a mayor of a medium-sized or a large or small city within, let's say, Africa, right? I mean, they have other issues involved, like financing, sustainable financing, and infrastructure, like Alex was saying. But I think the question of land tenure, and I don't want to overcome you as a moderator here, but this is something I think we should, or you can come back, of course, afterwards to Sheila, but this is something, I guess, that is so key. And I said 25 years of Cities Alliance, and Sheila is in the business even longer. And this, if you would ask the top 3 priorities to solve some of the issues, the first 3 would be land tenure, right? So this is really the critical point, also from our side, that enables or stops so many of the very good initiatives that are ongoing on the ground. But you reach a certain limit, and when it comes to land tenure, then you often get into troubled waters, let's say. Having said this, there are examples. I guess Sheila mentioned already a program by UN Habitat, but there are other programs, and I guess we can also hear maybe from the audience, from colleagues from SDI, what is their experience there. So it's a very contested topic, and it's not about outplaying maybe local communities against local governments here. So for us, being a partnership, this is really also a question of how you can solve this in partnership. And in some of the projects, I would say we are working on this topic for maybe 5 years, 10 years, and we still haven't got land tenure for most of the people we are working with there. But the process is initiated. People are listening to each other, right? I mean, people are participating in planning processes. How should our city look like, right? These kind of questions are a very first step, but then of course the question of land tenure is a critical point that often stops some of these initiatives. So this is something we need to continue working on and finding maybe more innovative solutions on this. I would be also interested to hear from others on this.
Thank you very much, Arne. And of course, it is my pleasure to ask Sheila if she would like to share her remarks specifically with this on this question of topic, how she wants to complement the already exhaustive answer by Alexandre and Arne.
I think that it's very important for us to look at every single initiative where people actually manage to get tenure. So in my own work, we found that when government wanted to do large infrastructure projects and it required people to be relocated, we could negotiate for them to get the space cleared so long as they gave them tenured alternatives and didn't just evict them. And global institutions and global pressure was very important because the investment of, say, the World Bank or any international agency was not provided if the alternative solution did not be ensured as equitable and just for those who were moving. That's one. The second thing is that there's a lot of political elements in this process. Poor people represent very big vote banks for the politicians and for the local and national elections. So I think it's important to understand the role of politics. In India, for instance, in some of our states, during many elections, the cutoff date for when you can not be evicted, it's all negative. You can't be evicted, say 10 years before the next election, because you have documentation of living there up to that date. And in the state where I come from, in Maharashtra, this is a very interesting way by which thousands upon thousands of households have got secure tenure in a what I call a negative way. It's not a proactive provision of solutions, but it is a passive way of saying, now you may not be evicted if you have lived in this place. That means you have to survive evictions and stay in that place long enough for you to be seen as a valuable person who will be useful for the political election process. So what we find is, Alex, this is a very interesting thing for us to do as STI, to look at what are the range of ways by which, and I think, Arne, this is one of the things we could do together. We could crowdsource how people have got different ways of getting tenure and what have they done with it and how have they changed their lives. And I think that we can use that to talk to mayors associations to say, why are you waiting? Because if you don't solve the problems of people today, the numbers are just going to multiply and your city will be even more unmanageable than it is today. And your ability to talk on behalf of the residents in your city gets weaker when a majority of them are not part of your inclusive policy making and solutions. And I think these are all ways by which we can do that. We also know that the problem with Asia and Africa is sort of Southern Asia, South Asia and East Africa, is that the volume of people coming in is growing. Those are the areas where both the volume and percentage of people coming into cities is growing. And these are the places that we should check, because the solutions in Latin America are visible now, and we should look at them simply because that has been stabilized to a great extent. That population has been stabilized. But in these two regions, this is going to double in the next, almost double. This is where those people are going to come. So how do we anticipate this? Who do we talk to? How do we look at solutions that have been done that have to grow? What do we need to do with national governments? Because many times resources to the cities are restricted by national politics on urbanization. And we still have many governments who believe that by making it strict, people won't come into the city. So they're not looking at the climate dimensions. So I think there's an exciting range of potential partnerships to produce advocacy that both community networks like STI and ACHR can use, but also that all of us can work with mayors, with national governments, and put the pressure from global climate and development sections, because the SDGs are dismal in this area. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And I think some of the elements that you described connects to the questions that you are popping up from the Q&A section. And there is one that stands at the first position in terms of likes. Has there been work on developing global building codes, identification of environmentally acceptable building materials? Who would like to start this? Maybe Arne, would you like to start answering this question?
Sure, thank you. And I guess, I mean, there is a lot of technical discussions, and in some of the debates, I have to admit, I'm not the expert to know what's best or what's working or not. But of course, there is a discussion on. I mean, most national governments would have some kind of coding in place, of course. We mentioned before the global ABC, the conference around construction that has happened in Paris, and some of the discussions there are actually exactly focusing around this, with a lens of more technical solutions and a lens of climate mitigation, of course. So the question for us then would be, is this coding helpful for us, right? Is this coding helpful for us? Because if you look at least our target communities, and I guess Alex can say something on this, the quality and the materials that reach these communities, they have not undergo most of the time any classification or any coding. In fact, I mean, some of this, to be quite blunt here, is material that has been somehow outsorted from markets in Europe and maybe North America, and cannot be used because the quality is too poor. And then some of the materials end up in markets in Africa, for instance, and are used there. So I guess the question of coding is an important one for the long term and for the climate debate, but for the short term in our countries, in our communities where we work in, it fails maybe a bit the needs, to address really the needs. But of course, I mean, this discussion is ongoing, and it's. I mean, you can just look at the markets in Europe. I live in Brussels. I think most of the places that are built here in Brussels are not following any, or of course are following codes and existing policies, but are not meeting the need to have this very low carbon construction that we actually need globally to go to net zero in this sector at some point, right? So I guess the question is, if we don't even manage to do this in these highly developed markets in Europe, where do we start then in markets that have other other starting conditions, let's say.
Thank you very much, Arne. I would like to leave now the floor to Alexander and then Sheila for also more elements on this question. I would like to ask you both if you can keep the answer under 2 minutes, so we will be able to answer the subsequent question after that.
Thank you, Lorenzo. The question of building codes is very important, and I'm going to give an entry point that's slightly different, but very important, especially when we're talking about improving informally occupied buildings in inner city areas. That is a form of informality that keeps increasing, and it's incredibly important when we're thinking about addressing issues of like low carbon urban development. If you want to keep low-income groups in inner city areas, in places that are close to livelihood opportunities, as well as reusing existing infrastructure to have a more circular form. So retrofitting in a kind of in affordable housing way, it's fundamental. And building codes is a key constrainer, a bottleneck, a handbrake in enabling these processes, because they have too high expectations. They don't break it down in ways that can generate incremental improvements. And we need to think about building codes in different ways, in ways that's not putting the standards so high up, and actually provides opportunities and recognize the agency of communities to be able to manage risk locally. Now, this conversation has to involve engineers, architects, and we need to find more incremental ways of regulating the upgrading of informally occupied buildings. If you want to talk more about this, tomorrow we have an event that IID is hosting precisely on this topic, and I shared the link here. Please join us tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for sharing the link with us. And last but not least, Sheila.
I echo many things that Alex is talking about. Is that, you know, we live in a world where our building codes keep getting refined and made even more superior, which means more exclusion, more inability to fulfill and follow them. Therefore, when you don't fulfill these things, you become excluded. So we are trying in Roof Over Our Heads to start, first of all, with safety standards. Go back to basics. Try and help people to get out of asbestos. Try and look at ways by which whatever material is available to them is used optimally, safely, and produce structures that will not fall on people's heads. So you work with engineers to work on simple basic joints to make sure that extreme weather doesn't destroy them, and to look at ways by which they can refurbish and improve the ambient quality of air inside that deals with extreme weather. We have to start from below. So the quality of improvement is commensurate with both safety and possible what people can do. Because what we're doing is we're making people feel terrible. We're telling them they're useless, they don't understand anything, they live in terrible conditions. How can you bring up children? I mean, everything is negative, and poor women are very pissed off with this because we are not helping them. We're not telling them how they can do this within the constraints of their incomes, their available options, and the available materials that they have. And that's why we want to be very simple and humble in Roof Over Our Heads. Don't start with these big ideas that nobody can do. Start with what people can do better. Celebrate that, bring it to scale, while we keep looking at how we change the markets, how we change the regulatory frameworks, how we change the larger fiscal environment. And that's where these partnerships are important. Right now, it's very easy to get lots of slum dwellers to work together with each other. But the minute we bring in a research organization, we have to negotiate because they say, oh, your standards are terrible. Of course they're terrible. That's the reality. Now, how are we going to get up from there? Everybody says, oh, but the mayors will not accept it. Can you facilitate a dialogue? And that's what we want from, say, Cities Alliance. Bring 10 leaders from slums, some of us as researchers and activists, sit with mayors who are committed to finding this exploration And let's look at how we can co-produce at least a minimum starting point. I think we can do it. It's not difficult, and the situation is in a terrible condition right now. And so when we talk about billions here and billions there, we have to start somewhere, and we have to produce hope. So I think that's my message to everybody. Whoever wants to explore hope, come and chat with us.
Thank you very much, Sheila. This is very inspiring as an approach. I'm sure there will be a lot of collaboration as a result of this dialogue we're having. We will only have time for one additional question to all the panelists. I'm bringing the order of the questions on the approval from the public. And so the most voted the question is a question connected to a point that has been somehow touched already, but I think there is an interest in deepening the understanding. What financing models or partnership models have you found to be most successful in supporting the technical aspects of sustainable planning, design, and construction? So I would like now to ask all our panelists if they can please just give a very brief question and answer under 2 minutes. Maybe we start with Alexandre.
For me, those that have again recognized the assets of communities on the ground, those financial systems that have been able to open up opportunities for communities to be able to access financing in ways that do not generate burden, but actually recognize collective forms of savings, collective mechanisms of also dealing with the risk of accessing finance. They have been the most successful. We have long stories of, for example, CLIF, UK FCDO funded programs through RIA, which used to be called Homeless International, that have facilitated through a series of partnership with communities on the ground access to finance, bridging the financial gap for those that are in informal settlements. And those stories, we need to revive those. We need to revive that story in ways that we were very successful, and Sheila has been part of the efforts to design those systems to be able then to address the financial gap in the construction sector, so that communities can access not only buying materials, but being able to collectively to process them, distribute them, and to engage in different activities throughout the value chain of building materials, and therefore gain bargaining power to affect decision-making processes.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Sheila, would you like to add your remarks on this point?
Oh, yes, of course. So without saying what Alex has said, I've been involved in looking at the financing elements of housing for the last 40 years, and the potential is there. But development agencies are not consistently looking at the impact and looking at ways by which that can be exponentially expanded. And I think we need to draw their attention. Their memories are very poor. Most people in FCDO have forgotten that they had such a thing called CLIF. So that's one. The second thing I feel is we have to start with making every bit of money that people are spending today to produce more resilient solutions. So start with what they have. They are presently not able to access design, material, and construction techniques, and as a result of that, have to keep spending money to just refurbish their present vulnerable home. So our first step is to say, how can we improve the solution that we are providing so that they don't have to use the money to just refurbish, but the money they put aside is used to upgrade and improve and stabilize their homes. Our data shows that every household is spending money every year for just refurbishing their home. So we're saying start with that. The second thing we're saying is collective, like Alex said, when 10 households decide to upgrade their homes, it is cheaper than each house doing it themselves. How do we support that? How do we create more strategic investments in those who assist people? we have experiences where we have helped women form small construction businesses that supervise this process, do collective purchases for communities, things like that. So there are lots of evidences of solutions. We have to aggregate them, bring them to scale, and look at them. The other, a very important lesson we have all learned is that borrowing global money is dangerous, because then the interest rates grow hugely. They're almost up to 36% in real terms. So creating domestic solutions for borrowing, lending through banks, who we may give, say, guarantees to lend to poor people. I mean, we have to do smart solutions that don't burden communities because of the loans that they're taking. Because most of the loans that people are now saying that, oh, let's get money, there are these global funds in hard currency. They don't work for poor people. The interest rates are too high. So I think we all have to put our heads together to find a solution in which national governments acknowledge the need to support these and provide subsidies to these groups. A lot of governments are giving subsidies, but they're only going to build full houses. So that comes to the top 5% rather than the bottom 15%. So I think the housing finance strategy has to come through. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And I would like to ask Arne if, very briefly, under 1 minute, if possible, would like to add any points regarding this financing topic.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess most of it has been said. These bottom-up approaches, I guess, have been tested. They are working, and the communities have ownership when using these revolving funds or community funds or saving groups, however you call them. I just want to put in maybe also the topic of, yes, there is still the need for top-down financing when it comes to, for instance, urban infrastructure, right? And this is something where we need to talk to the donors and need to talk to the banks, and Cities Alliance is organizing a variety of sessions around this to make them understand that these corridor approaches, this rarely just focus on pure infrastructure investments is too short-sighted. So you need to look left and right. I mean, these infrastructure approaches, think of a road or something, is not happening in an empty space, right? This is happening where people are living and people are making a living. So you have to integrate and look left and right of these planned infrastructures that is needed, of course, for urban development, but you need to include the people living there and around this area from the very beginning. And I guess this is something where these two financing models could meet: top-down massive investments in city development in a sustainable way, but also in a social inclusive way. And on the other side, having these bottom-up approaches of incremental and small scale, but big in the end financing approaches.
Thank you very much, Arne. Well, we are almost at the end of our webinar, regretfully, but this is the very important last moment when we have a final round with our speakers, and we ask them to share what is their final remark, their main takeaway from this enriching, inspiring debate. So in under 1 minute, I know how challenging this is. We explored many topics. I would like to start with Sheila.
I have only one challenge to all of us. Can we say that in 6 months we have another meeting in which you demonstrate how we work together, what are our challenges, and how can we produce solutions that provide hope that there can be change? And all of us should be responsible to make that happen.
Thank you very much, Sheila, for this proposal. I think it aligns perfectly with all the organizers. This is an ongoing conversation, and we will certainly continue to discuss and explore solutions together to have an impact all together. Thank you, Sheila. Arne.
Yeah, Sheila mentioned hope already twice, and this is, I admire her that she still has this hope after all these years in working on this and having all these, seeing all the issues and problems ahead. What I like about this webinar series is really what you said already, that this is an ongoing series and it has a clear goal, which is the World Urban Forum. And I guess this could be something that we organize, or if it's maybe already planned, to organize another meeting to take stock what we have seen throughout the series and how we can use this partnership. And you have introduced all the partners of this group, and all of them bring their experience to the table. But now we have to. This is another catchword, let's say, but walk the talk, and this is why it's so important to have these kind of webinars, to have these discussions, and have them also organized by somebody like a bilateral donor, like the German ministry, or so, to really bring these wealth of knowledge and the questions we have, and maybe potential answers also more to the donor side for future collaboration.
Thank you very much, Arne. Last but not least, Alexandre.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Yeah, just to echo everybody, I think it's fundamental we do more work collaboratively. And the spirit of that in IID, we are going to be launching very soon what we are calling the Hub for Housing Justice. It's something that we've been working on. And this topic is going to be one of the key agendas that we hope to be promoting, supporting, engaging with our partners and other networks. And during the World Urban Forum, we will be there trying to also highlight the importance of the debates around housing justice, and we hope to be able to connect to these initiatives and to be able to support collaborative engagement. We need to do much more work together. We need to sharpen up what are our advocacy objectives and act together to advance them. And I hope we can do that. I think we have a lot of interest, and also we have lots of organizations working in this field interested in joining. So let's do it. Let's go around the hope that Sheila was stimulating us to do.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. I would like now to ask our technical support if they can share finally for a last time the slide about the Slido link. We would be very happy to receive your feedbacks regarding this episode, as well as your expectation for the next topic that will be discussed, which is framing pro-poor nature-based solutions. What would you like to see regarding this specific topic? Many thanks to all of you for this enriching debate. I think we have a lot of takeaways with us. We have seen, I can see that there is, here it is, the slide appearing on screen. Feel free to write your remarks that will be duly read by all the organizers. Once again, thank you very much to our panelists for the enriching takeaways. Many thanks to Sheila Patel, Alexandre Apsan-Frediani, Arne Georg Jansen, and Barbara Schultz for the opening remarks. Of course, thanks to all of you in the audience for your kind participation. The recording and some additional material from our speakers will be shared with all the participants that registered, as you should kindly share with us your email. Thank you very much to all of you. Goodbye and take care.